My phone lit up with "Mom." I almost didn't answer. But I did. I put it on speaker. I kept folding laundry. Her voice was sweet in that practiced way. "Don't panic," she said. "We just need you to be reasonable." Then my dad took the phone like it was a business call. "Your brother's in trouble," he said. 610,000. I stopped folding. Not because of the number. Because of what he said next. "The family must be sacrificed," he told me. "And you're the only one who can do it." I looked at my hands. I smiled. And that's when I realized they weren't calling for help. They were calling to hand me the bill. My parents have always spoken in code. Not the fun kind. The kind that makes cruelty sound like responsibility. The kind that turns favoritism into a family values. Growing up, my brother Ethan was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets expected to stay in orbit. When he forgot rent, it was a rough month. When I needed help with tuition, it was, "You'll figure it out." When he crashed a car, my dad called it bad luck. When I got my first job at 16, my mom said, "Good. Now you won't need anything." So when my dad said 610,000, my first thought wasn't shock. My first thought was, how did he manage to drag you into this one? I asked the only question that mattered. How? There was a pause. Then my mother, softly, like she was offering me a warm towel. "It's complicated," she said. "But it's not his fault." That sentence landed like it always did. Automatic. Loyal. Unquestioned. I walked into the living room and sat down, not because I needed to, but because I didn't want my voice to give me away. My dad cleared his throat. He took out loans. Business credit. Some personal guarantees. For what business? I asked. Another pause. My mom rushed in before my dad could answer. "He was trying to build something. You know Ethan. He dreams big." I almost laughed. Dreams were always allowed to be expensive when they belonged to him. "So what do you need from me?" I asked, even though I already knew. My dad said it cleanly. "We need you to co-sign a refinance. Or take a home equity line." I blinked. "On my house." "Yes," he said. Like it was obvious. Like it was normal. "It's the only asset that's clean." My mother added, "It's just temporary. Once things stabilize, we'll fix it." Temporary. Fix it. Family. Words that meant, "You'll pay, and we'll move on." I kept my voice calm. "Why can't you use your house?" My dad exhaled like I was being difficult. "Our house is tied up." Retirement. "You don't understand." I understood perfectly. They'd protect themselves first. They always had. I asked, "Does Ethan know you're calling me?" My mom's voice dipped. "He's embarrassed. He doesn't want you to judge him." I pictured my brother, embarrassed, while letting them pressure me like a collection agency. Something in my chest tightened, not with anger, but with a familiar, humiliating clarity. This wasn't a family conversation. This was a transfer. My dad kept talking. "If we don't do something, creditors will come. Lawsuits. Garnishments. It'll ruin him." "And if I say no?" I asked. Silence. Then my mother said the quiet part out loud. "Then you're choosing money over family." There it was. The old trap. If I said yes, I was responsible. If I said no, I was selfish. Either way, Ethan stayed innocent. I looked around my living room. The couch I bought secondhand. The curtains I hung myself. The framed photo of me and my daughter at the beach. Everything I built after years of being told I'd figure it out. My dad spoke again, firmer. We're not asking. We're telling you what needs to happen. And my mother, sweet as sugar, finished it like a blessing. The family must be sacrificed, she said. That's what families do. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't remind them of the times I'd already sacrificed quietly. The birthdays I worked. The emergencies I handled alone. The way I always showed up and never got caught. I just said, okay. Then I added, softly, send me everything. All documents. All statements. Every lender. My dad relaxed instantly. Like the deal was done. My mom exhaled like she'd won. See? I knew you'd do the right thing. I ended the call and stared at the blank screen. My hands were steady. But inside, something shifted. Because asking for paperwork wasn't agreement. It was the first time in my life I decided to look at the truth, before I paid for it. And when my mom's email came 10 minutes later, there was one attachment that felt strangely missing. The documents arrived in pieces. Not all at once. Not clean. Not transparent. An email here. A scanned statement there. A screenshot of a balance without a header. Each one came with a short explanation, always framed the same way. This is normal. Don't worry about that line. The bank does that sometimes. I didn't respond right away. I thanked them. I said I was reviewing everything. I asked careful, boring questions. Inside, I wasn't calm. At night, I lay awake doing math in my head. Not just numbers. Patterns. Why some statements were current and others weren't. Why interest rates were missing. Why one lender's name changed between documents. Why the total kept landing near 610,000, but never exactly. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up around 3, stare at the ceiling, and think about how many times I'd been told I was the responsible one. How that word always showed up right before I was expected to absorb damage meant for someone else. During the day, I went quiet. I stopped volunteering opinions in the family group chat. I stopped reacting to photos of Ethan smiling, on vacation, eating out, living like someone who wasn't drowning in debt. Nobody noticed my silence at first. They never do when you've trained them to expect your availability, not your presence. My mother checked in once. Not to ask how I was. To ask if I'd made progress. I'm still reviewing, I said. She sounded impatient. It's not that complicated. That made me smile. Because it was. I asked Ethan directly if he wanted to talk. He didn't call. He texted. Mom said you're handling it. Thanks. No explanation. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he was asking me to risk. Just relief. That message did something to me. It didn't make me angry. It made me clear. I started organizing the documents properly. I laid them out by lender. By date. By obligation. By signature. That's when I saw it. A personal guarantee. Not mine. My father's. Dated 2 years earlier. I read it 3 times, slow. His name. His signature. His social. All there. The debt wasn't just Ethan's. It never had been. My parents hadn't called me because they had no options. They called because they didn't like theirs. If Ethan defaulted, my father would be exposed. His retirement. His credit. His carefully protected future. And suddenly, the language made sense. Sacrifice. Family. Temporary. They weren't asking me to save my brother. They were asking me to replace them. I kept my voice steady on the next call. I need a little more time, I said. My dad sighed loudly. Time is exactly what we don't have. My mom added, you're overthinking this. I let them talk. I listened for pressure. For fear. For cracks. They were worried now. Not about Ethan. About themselves. I slept better that night. Not because the problem was solved. But because the story I'd been told my whole life had finally slipped. And for the first time, they didn't know what I was thinking. That was the shift. Quiet. Invisible. But real. I didn't confront them. I didn't mention the guarantee. I didn't accuse my father of hiding anything. I didn't tell Ethan what I knew. I just slowed down. When my parents called, I answered calmly. I told them I was still waiting on clarity. When they pushed, I asked neutral questions. Dates. Terms. Names. The kind of questions that make people nervous without sounding hostile. My mother started calling more often. Short calls. Checking my tone. Testing me. You're still with us, right? She asked once, half joking. I'm just being careful, I said. That word bothered her. Careful didn't fit the role she'd written for me. Meanwhile, I spoke to a financial advisor. Not to plan a rescue. To understand exposure. Risk. What happened when someone else's signature quietly disappeared from a deal? Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Just information. I learned what happens when lenders realize there's a guarantor they can't ignore. I learned how fast conversations change when liability is clear. I learned that silence, paired with facts, is more unsettling than refusal. I stopped discussing timelines. That made my father restless. He started reminding me how much he'd done for me. How family stepped up. How this was my moment to prove I belonged. I listened. I took notes. Ethan texted once. Any update? I replied hours later. Still reviewing. That was it. No reassurance. No promise. Days passed. Then weeks. Something interesting happened. My parents stopped telling me what I needed to do and started asking what they could provide. My mother forwarded documents she'd never mentioned before. My father explained things he'd previously brushed off. They were adjusting. Not out of care. Out of fear. Because I hadn't refused. And I hadn't agreed. I'd become unpredictable. One afternoon, my dad asked, "What happens if this doesn't get resolved?" I paused before answering. Long enough for him to feel it. Then everyone handles their own responsibilities, I said. He didn't argue. After we hung up, I realized something simple and final. I didn't need to save anyone. All I had to do was stop volunteering to be the solution. And when you do that long enough, systems correct themselves. They always do. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Not from my parents. From my father's bank. They weren't angry. They were polite. Professional. They wanted to clarify a few things about a personal guarantee tied to Ethan's loans. I didn't panic. I didn't correct them. I simply said, "Yes, my father signed that." The conversation was short after that. I didn't hear from my parents for 3 days. When my mother finally called, her voice had lost its softness. There was no talk of sacrifice. No mention of family duty. "They're coming after your father," she said. "This is serious." I waited. Let the silence work. "So what are you going to do?" she asked. There it was. One last attempt to place me back where I'd always been. "I'm going to do nothing," I said. My father took the phone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just said, "We'll handle it." And they did. They sold things. Restructured. Made calls they'd avoided before. Ethan moved back in with them. His lifestyle shrank. His safety net finally became visible. No one apologized. They didn't need to. Because the roles had changed. They stopped asking me for help. They stopped calling me responsible. They stopped assuming my life was collateral. Months later, my mother mentioned the debt in passing. Like a closed chapter. You know how families go through phases, she said. I smiled. Not out of bitterness. Out of understanding. I hadn't taken revenge. I'd stepped aside. And in doing so, I learned something my parents never taught me. Sacrifice is only noble when it's chosen. And peace comes the moment you stop paying for someone else's escape.